I'm gonna call the meeting,
Do you want us to bring it to you or someone?
that's fine. I'm gonna call the meeting to order. Here we are at the, as David likes to say, we are at the November installment meeting of TAAC. I'm not sure what the word installment has to do with our monthly meeting, but, so with that, we will do roll call.
Okay. I'm Patty Thorson, and I'm representing Trellis, or the Metros. It's Trellis, it's the Area Agency on Aging. Oh,
Doug Cook, Metro Transit Liaison.
Claudia Fugli, MNCCD.
Eric Henderson, MCD.
Heidi Meyer, Minnesota CCD.
Richard Rowan, AARP.
And I am Darrell Paulsen, the vice chair, and also representing Region H, I believe. Am I correct on that? F. Okay. I've represented almost every region on the council at some point, or I represent a couple different ones, so I apologize. And with that, we call the meeting to order a little bit later today, and I apologize. We do have some folks online as well, and so.
Are they going to introduce themselves?
Can they go as well? I see Trevor, as well, if you could unmute. And
Thanks, Darrell. Yeah, this is Trevor.
Yeah,
I'm
we'll
Trevor
swing
Turner,
back
Public
by
Policy
Andy.
Director for the Minnesota Council on Disability.
I'll swing back by you on the introduction after we're done. I'll swing back and get you after.
Hello?
Okay.
Hello, Patsy, I'll be right back.
Okay. So did everybody online
No,
introduce?
only one person.
Okay. So,
So
who else is
whoever,
there? Who's the
This is
763 number?
It's Sam.
Hi, Sam.
Hi.
can you introduce yourself, Sam?
Sorry, Sam Jasmine, Precinct, what am I? Precinct A?
And who's next?
Thank you.
So we have Sam and Trevor. Who else is online?
That would be Patsy, but she's not sitting there yet.
Okay.
Okay, and then the other lady's waiting to say.
There she is.
Diane Graham-Raff from Trellis, the Area Agency on Aging.
Hi, Diane. Thank you.
Okay, now she can say her name.
And Patsy, you want to go ahead? Unmute and introduce?
Sorry about that, Patsy.
Patsy, introduce yourself.
I just said hello, everyone.
Hello. Who are you?
Patsy, and what's your area?
Well, anyway, having said that, can I have an approval for today's agenda?
Actually, Darrell, can I have 5
Oh,
minutes?
sorry about that, and I forgot to have Andy introduce himself as well.
Andy Streisick, Metro Mobility, and then also, can I amend the agenda or ask that you guys amend the agenda to add just 5 minutes for a brief statement on a Metro Mobility issue? I can put it during public comment if you want to, or just before.
Yeah, absolutely. That's
I
fine.
think it should be before because if it's important.
Yeah, I
Sure.
do too.
Sure, we'll
How do I
get.
name myself again? Is it
How
Star?
about we do it before we do reports or subcommittee reports, right?
Okay.
And then if it looks like we're not gonna get to it, we can we'll get it in there. All right. So with that, there is an approval to amend the agenda to and then also I would like an approval of the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda with the noted amendment.
I'll second.
I'll third.
Okay, any further discussion? And seeing none, let's take a vote. I'll approve the agenda for November 2nd, 2022. Say aye. Aye. Those opposed?
Don't, excuse me,
Yes.
Darrell? Yes. Excuse me, Vice Chair. Don't you usually go around and get a voice?
Not when it, not if it's an approval of like the agenda or like the past minute meetings. We will do some discussion and go around for any further discussion on like action items, but on those typical housekeeping items, we typically wouldn't go through a full discussion unless somebody had further discussion or had a change to or a discussion item.
We did do that when, Chair?
Go
Yeah, we
ahead.
did do it when.
We did do that when we had Zoom because it was hard to see everybody. So,
Okay.
Virtual meeting, but not an in-person one.
yeah. So she is right in one respect, in
Should
another
we-
respect, we're kind of in person too.
So would it be okay if we circled back around if Sam needed us to? Would we be opposed to it or not?
No, we all answered your question.
Okay. But generally, like Andy was saying, that is done in a virtual meeting, not in a hybrid meeting such as this, correct? Is that right, Andy?
I think David has done it in the hybrid meeting, but I'll go with whatever you guys want to do. It's just nice to know who's all there because I came in apparently late, and I don't know who's there and who isn't, but no biggie.
Go ahead, Andy.
I see, Sam. Are you talking about the introductions? The going around and doing introductions, Sam?
No, I was just wondering, because I thought we had generally did the individual vote, but it's okay. Move on. It's okay.
She just wants to make sure she knows who's who.
I'm
It's okay. It's fine.
confused by that.
I think she just missed the introductions.
Sorry about that. Okay. Then, so we had an approval of our agenda, and so now I need an approval for our minutes from September 7th, 2022.
I move
Patsy will
approval.
approve him.
Patty moved to approve our minutes for September 7th, 2022. I need a second for that.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Richard. Anybody, any further discussion, any corrections, any deletions, any additions, to that? And if there is none, I would move for approval.
So moved.
Second,
Thank you.
sorry. Go ahead.
I believe I'm doing this right.
Okay.
So anyway, and then our next item on our agenda is, no, we have presenters here. We have Better Bus Stops update, and we are going to be joined by Barry Farrington and Amar. I'm not very good at pronouncing that name, but it's a planner. You're a planner with Better Bus Stops. So thank you for coming.
Thank you for that welcome. I'm Barry Farrington. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the program manager of Better Bus Stops in Metro Transit's Engineering and Facilities Department.
Yes, yeah, thank you for having us. My name is Arman Rajaeian. I'm also a planner in the Engineering and Facilities Department at Metro Transit. And we're here today to provide the TAAC an update on all of the exciting initiatives we've been working on as part of the Better Bus Stops program. Just as a quick reminder to you all, Better Bus Stops works to improve the customer experience at bus stops through providing information, building accessible boarding areas and pedestrian connections, as well as investing in shelters and other associated amenities at bus stops. So next slide, please. The main topics that Barry and I will discuss with you all today. First, we want to touch on the bus stop accessibility improvement guidelines that we've developed this past year. Next, we'd like to discuss bus stop data collection that we've conducted this past summer. And then Barry will update you all on improvements to our bus stops in 2022. Next slide, please. So first things first, let's start with the bus stop accessibility improvement guidelines. We at Metro Transit created this framework for capital improvement because before developing these guidelines, improvements to deficient bus stops occurred in a very ad hoc manner, mostly when roadway authorities or development projects improve conditions at bus stops. You have to remember bus stops are located in public right-of-way, located in areas under control by external stakeholders at the local, county, and state level.
Just click got it.
And so these guidelines now set forth a system for evaluating and prioritizing
louder.
bus stops for ADA improvements. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me start again. You must remember, so these guidelines now set forth a system for evaluating and prioritizing bus stop improvements independent of those one-off development projects or roadway projects. We're now looking at the entire universe of bus stops Metro Transit serves and prioritizing inaccessible ones for capital improvement by evaluating activity occurring at those bus stops. The data that we utilize for this prioritization includes customer boardings, customer alightings, limited mobility fare card data, and bus ramp deployment data. These last two data points, the fare card and bus ramp deployment data, we refer to these as the limited mobility indicators. And so what you see on the screen right now is a very condensed form of the guidelines, which you can find online. But they go from highest to lower priority. Our highest priority stops for improvement are bus stops that have 10 or more daily boardings and alightings with demonstrated limited mobility usage. Our high priority locations are bus stops with 5 or more daily boardings and alightings with demonstrated limited mobility usage. Medium priority locations are bus stops that just have 1 or more daily boardings independent of limited mobility usage. And then those lower priority locations are simply locations where we're finding less than one person getting on and off the bus. And so the purpose in defining high to lower priorities is to help us scope capital projects and make progress on the ADA transition plan. It should be noted that all bus stops are a priority, and we're clear that the ADA requirements apply to bus stops, period. So there is no threshold for accessibility at bus stops, and it's necessary for us to have these accessible to the fullest extent possible. So we take these guidelines and we review our network and implement them on an annual basis with approximately 20 to 30 stops put into the capital improvement plan every year. And so this is just a framework for us to improve, to find and locate and improve the bus stops. But as I mentioned, our goal is to make improvements at deficient stops. One issue for us as an agency is understanding specifically where we have inaccessible or deficient bus stops. And so that gets me to my next slide, please. We know that we have a data gap at Metro Transit for physical site conditions at bus stops, especially when it comes to determining accessibility, because you do need to gather information, technical information, like a bus stop's width, depth, and slope. And so this lack of data and knowledge limits our ability to fully implement the guidelines that I just went over, as we're kind of doing a lot of sleuthing on web services like Google Maps, trying to ascertain whether or not a bus stop is deficient. We do have some older data sets that can give us a decent idea of whether or not a bus stop is paved, but these legacy data sets, I'll call them, do not come close to containing all the data points needed by the ADA. So this really pointed to us needing to conduct large-scale data collection, putting to use our bus stop accessibility checklist, which covers the full gamut of ADA requirements at bus stops, as well as the technical details needed to design and engineer accessible bus stops. So next slide, please. So touching on the data collection, this past summer, we hired a bus stop accessibility intern to conduct bus stop accessibility and site condition audits. We billed it as a data collection pilot, as this was our first time conducting data collection for an extended period across many stops. Through our intern's help, we were able to collect comprehensive site condition data at over 900 bus stops, which was much more than we expected to collect in a 3-month span. We focused on specific routes at a time, starting off with routes 4, moving on to routes 17, 54, 64, 515, and 23. Additionally, through the Better Bus programs of years past, we also have site accessibility data on routes 3, 22, and 63 through the speed and reliability improvements that were made. And so on routes 3, 22, and 63, we've also implemented capital improvements to deficient bus stops on those routes. So as you can see on the left, you see a map. This represents a large geographic swath of our region, reaching from St. Louis Park in the west to Woodbury in the east, Brooklyn Center in the north, and Bloomington in the south. And really, in my opinion, it's a really great start in tackling that data gap that I described. This pilot data collection phase was valuable not only for the sheer amount of useful accessibility data that we retrieved, but also refining our data collection process, because we visited a lot of places in a short amount of time. And so we learned a lot from that experience. And then just lastly, this newly collected data is going to be put to use immediately starting next year, helping us inform where we have deficient bus stops when we start prioritizing capital improvements in 2023. And just to round this out, the two images that you see on the screen, the image on the left is an image that we collected this summer, and it shows a fully accessible bus stop that's brand new, contrasted with the image on the right, which is showing an inaccessible bus stop in a grassy median. So thank you, and I'll give it to Barry.
Thanks, Arman. Next slide, please. I'd like to just cover the capital project progress we've made this calendar year, and as we wrap up our construction season. We will have added 23 new shelters at bus stops that did not have them previously, and that's in addition to the work that's underway to bring out the D line December 3rd. We have replaced 29 shelters that were in poor condition, are old, or just needed to be replaced, preventative maintenance kind of replacement. We added 35 accessible boarding areas. That was in partnership with cities and counties and roadway authorities. We also have designed 14 accessible bus stop areas to go into construction next year, and those are ones that in the guidelines that Arman described, those are highest and high priority, so we're already putting that guideline work into our capital program. We added light to 34 shelters, heat to 15 shelters, and unique for this year, our maintenance staff modified about 70 shelter benches, and these are older shelters where the bench had crossed from sidewall to sidewall, effectively blocking the shelter for someone using a mobility device to roll fully into the back. So now those benches are about halfway across the shelter. Next slide, please. Here's just a quick example of a shelter replacement where we've been focusing on really doing the best we can to create a more accessible bus stop. In this case, we cleared that pedestrian access route and boarding area by using a different type of shelter in our replacement. So the photo on the left shows the old condition where the shelter is behind the sidewalk, but because it's rather wide, it's actually sticking out into the pathway of the sidewalk. It has a windscreen at the front that blocks the 5x8 clear area that we want for the bus front door. And this shelter has a bench that is at full length of the shelter back, which we don't want to have. So the shelter on the right is the new replacement, and it is a different style of shelter, so it fits fully behind that sidewalk. the accessible boarding area is clear, the bench is appropriately sized, and we're bringing that attention to detail more in our plans. Next slide, please. I mentioned that of our 34 shelters that we added light to, I wanted to note that 18 of those were solar lights. This is a newer model of solar lighting that we are piloting. In the past, when we've put solar light on shelters, we've had a pole next to the shelter, but this is a rooftop solar panel, sits on top of the shelter roof, so it's a little less clutter around the bus stop. This photo shows a shelter lit up quite brightly by that solar panel powered lights. So we're excited to roll that out into the system. And we know we've heard from your committee before and others the importance of lighting at transit stops. And so when we look at bus stops, BRT stations, LRT stations, transit centers, anywhere you might board, about 64% of customer boardings are happening where there is light. So we're working on keeping that number climbing.
Thank you.
Next slide, please. Thank you. So in addition to our standard capital projects, we're trying to grow how we work with our partners for bus stop accessibility. So we continue to work with development projects and roadway projects to get good accessible bus stop designs built by others. This year, for example, began partnering with the City of Bloomington on development review. We already work with the City of Minneapolis and St. Paul in that process. So when new construction happens and it has a bus stop at the front door, we can get a good design. This year, we also partnered with our Met Council Office of Equity and Equal Opportunity to create a video that shows in a nutshell what is a good accessible bus stop so that we can share that directly with our partners to help hammer home that design advice that we offer. This video is about 1.5 minutes, and with your permission, we'd like to show it in the meeting if that's okay.
Please.
Okay. Jason, could I ask you to press play on the center of the slide, please?
That's why it looks like that.
The video should be embedded in the slide, Jason. I'll just see if you can make it play. If not, I apologize, and we can send the link. All right, thank you.
I thought it was the winter scene.
I might have time to pop my pop without,
There you go.
without being rude,
Can
right?
I just say one thing right now?
Go ahead.
You want to make handicapped accessible, but I take the 54 and there is a bus stop. And when I cross to get to it, I'm at downtown St. Paul, Treasure Island. There is a bus, and I have the picture right here to prove it. And I took it a year ago and it's still there. And I was on a committee to talk about it and nothing has been done. You have your schedule inside and outside. So if I want to look at the outside of the schedule, the back of it, I have to be on the street. It's literally in the middle of the street. And I saw in two of your pictures, you had put it on the side of the thing. So it's not in the back, but it's on the side. And that's where it used to be. And then somebody along the way decided to put it again. So and I actually saw just last month, somebody had to go in the street in order to look at the map to see when the bus is coming. And I've seen a few bus shelters where you're putting a picture on the back and it's in the front is the thing. So I was glad that one wasn't like the other side, you have to go in the street. So there's somehow we can, if you really are truly dedicated, take a look at how you're putting your signs. Because I mentioned this a couple of different committees.
Heidi, are you particularly talking about where the scheduling placement goes?
The bus
typically?
schedule, yes, because if she's talking handicapped accessible, Darrell, you would be in the street fighting for your life and you wouldn't be able to get close enough to read it.
Okay.
And so, if you want to see my picture later, I can show you because it's a serious issue.
Thank you, Heidi, and we'll see if our tech's ready to.
So I just wanted to bring that up.
Thank you. And regarding the video, I suspect that in the embedding of the video was lost. at some point. Okay, well, we can send the video to this group
Yeah,
after
and
the
then
meeting.
we'll send it out.
Absolutely. It's like it's on YouTube and it's a good video just that describes accessibility at bus stops, what's required, and it's a great video for us to share internally and externally with partners.
How long has the video been out?
You know, it's unlisted on YouTube, so only people with the link can access it. And it's been out for about a month.
Okay.
Thanks. One more slide, Jason, please.
Bye.
Thanks.
Proceed.
Well, we appreciate the chance to be here today. We did note a couple questions. We, listen to any feedback or ideas you have, but we're curious if there were other measures in addition to the activity and limited mobility users that Arman described that you'd like us to consider for those improvement guidelines. If you have any other suggestions for information sources to help us identify priority bus stops for people with disabilities, and if you would like to share any of your bus stop experiences, that's always helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that presentation, I do have a couple questions, but I'll give it to the committee first. Anybody have any burning questions? Go ahead, Richard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you both for the work you guys are doing on looking at routes and getting a lot of those maintenance activities and ADA, that work done that's needed at some of those bus shelters. I did have a question in your presentation. You had mentioned that you had to send out an intern to kind of do some of the surveys and collect data to see where noncompliance was had. And then you also mentioned that you do also utilize the 88 transition plan. I guess I'm curious on why there's a gap in the 88 transition plan. We had a presentation, I think, a couple of years ago on that where they had hired a consultant to do an inspection of basically all services for the Met Council. And I'm curious why the bus stops weren't included in that 88 transition plan and all those deficiencies identified.
Absolutely. I can take this one. So the audit that you're describing that occurred in 2019, the scope of that audit was primarily public and support facilities for the Metropolitan Council. And so it only focused on public and support facilities. We have over 10,000 bus stops in our network. And so there's no conceivable way to have a consultant go and complete a full accessibility audit of 10,000 bus stops in a reasonable time frame. So that's something that we've always been planning on conducting, and I think that began this summer with this pilot. But the effort that you're describing focused on like park and rides, transit centers, support facilities like the rail maintenance facilities, things of that nature. And if there were any bus stops associated with those facilities, like adjacent to a park and ride, they were included within that audit. But there was a deliberate decision made to not include bus stops at that time because it would have just really inflated the scope to be something.
How many bus stops did the intern get to last year or this year?
This year, she visited 900 bus stops in 3 months.
So it'd take 10 years if that process continued to complete inspection of all the existing bus stops, if there's over 10,000?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say 10 years because it was very.
903 months, right?
Excuse me?
It was 903 months, right?
Yeah, well, 903 months, and we had to have, there was a deliberate time frame with this intern. It was June, July, August, and then it was over. And really, we decided to go with an intern doing the data collection as kind of like a trial run to see what it would take to have someone go out in the field primarily most of the day, conduct these audits, and just do that repeatedly week after week. And so I think one thing that we learned is that it doesn't need to be under the pretense of an internship. It could be maybe a little bit more fluid, and we get like a temporary worker who's able to start earlier in the year, not under the what I'll refer to as the confines of the internship program, where they start in late May and then usually finish their internship by the end of the summer. And so that's, I think, something that we are looking for and looking forward to entertaining in 2023 of, getting someone on board earlier in the year and having them do more data collection, and therefore that could definitely speed up the timeline that you described of like, if we have 6 months of data collection, that means we might collect close to 2,000 bus stops, for example.
That's great. I mean, that's important work. It's, I know, arduous and tedious and time-consuming, but, I think this committee would be interested in just kept apprised of that and see how, the ideas come to fruition and kind of that plan that could probably be baked into the overall guidelines that you created, which I think are great as well, like looking at where to focus, prioritize is important, I think, in those plans. So I know we'd be just curious to kind of how that kind of proceeds, because I think one of the other metrics you mentioned is there's about 20 to 30 stops that can be done a year, or improvements that can be planned. And I know that probably all 10,000 aren't deficient, but I'm assuming a lot are. So if we can only inspect so many at a certain rate, and then we're at even a lower rate at which we can do those improvements, the more I think we put towards that, the better. So, but I think the initial guidelines and the work you guys are doing, again, is really great. So thank you.
Thank you.
I see Trevor has his hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Darrell.
Go ahead.
I just had a question. Is there any talk of potentially having just everyday riders report in deficient bus stops? Like Heidi had mentioned, she had taken a photo of the bus stop that she thought was not ADA compliant. I certainly have lots of photos on my phone that bus stops that I think are not deficient. Is there a way that there could be like a number that you could text photos or text report that this bus stop isn't sufficient for people with disabilities? But that could be a really great way to help just kind of aggregate all the riders' ability to kind of do that data collection of bus stops that need to be addressed.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's something that we have thought about in the past. I think the main thing that keeps us from opening that door is data quality. So by having someone trained in the ADA law and well-versed in our accessibility checklist, which, as I said, is the full, it covers every single aspect needed for bus stop accessibility, but as well as design and engineering. That's primarily the main reason we've kind of taken that route initially. But it is something that we have thought about, and I think we can still continue to consider, especially if it were to be, a way to at least flag deficient stops, or at least just kind of get us on the right path to go and do that comprehensive audit in the field. I think that is something we could consider down the line.
And Chair, if I might, if there are stops that you have a concern, you can always email that photo to customer relations at Metro Transit or call us. And if you have the bus stop site ID, that's helpful, but that specific corner location can help us investigate it.
I knew there was an email.
Well, I don't see any.
Right there.
Patty, go ahead.
A couple different questions. One, I want to say I'm impressed by I'm glad that the Better Bus Stop program exists, because it's a good way to channel the concerns. Two thoughts. One, at a 10,000 foot level, we talk about individual bus stops and whether, as the unit that you're evaluating by, as providers of the system, I understand why, you've got to narrow down to be able to account for it. As somebody who's using the system, if they are able to they need to know that they're going to be able to get from their original starting point to the destination and then back to their starting point. And so my question there would be, is the corresponding, when, let's say you have bus stop number 1, and so that's going one direction, let's just say that's going eastbound. And bus stop, the nearest bus stop to bus stop number 1 going the opposite direction. Is there a way to account for both of those together so that, or thinking about, if I were to take a bus and be able to get only to my destination, but not able to get back again? Just a thought. The other thing is more practical, maybe. Have you thought about, I looked at your online description of the bus projects that were, bus stop projects that were being planned. You know, there was a map. Have you thought of putting a link between that and the trip planner website as well as the next trip website? Because that would connect users that are, you know, it may not help them on that immediate trip, but if they use those stops frequently, those were just 2 thoughts that came to my mind. I'm glad,
Absolutely.
glad you're doing the work you are.
And thank you, Patty. And I did have a couple of thoughts as well. My concerns were more of the intimate weather and the fact that you guys only surveyed 900 bus stops in 3 months. Congratulations for that. But and it was only during the warmer months, right?
Absolutely.
And it was only during the day as well, right?
Absolutely.
Activity changes at bus stops throughout the day. They might be busier in the day, not so busy at night, or they might be not as busy during the day and very busy at night. So those things need to be in an account. And the other things I seen, I was excited to see that you guys were picking up on the lighting and what that means to perceive safety and those kind of things. But I also don't see any pictures that are showing receptacles or trash cans for garbage. I also would say that I would be the new bus stops look great. I use them. I understand that that's what we're gonna do. But I actually preferred if the heating element is never going to get fixed where the heating comes down far enough so that I can utilize it if I'm out there in cold weather, then I would prefer the older bus stop, as you showed, with the windscreen. And I know that limits the number of people that can be in that shelter, but at the same time, if you make the shelter small enough or large enough, you kind of will cut down on some of the activity that maybe happens around certain stops. So I'm kind of caught in a catch-22 there as to, yes, I like the more space, but when you make the space tighter, you kind of make sure you limit who can be at the bus stop, and that might cut down on some of the undesirable activities that happen at certain bus stops. That was just my suggestion and my thoughts. I do see a couple other hands. Andy, you had your hand up as well at one point.
I'm Jasmine as well.
And then we need to get to folks online as well. So Heidi, we'll circle back with you, but Andy, you're next. And then we'll go to Sam. Sorry about that.
I just wanted to make sure that everybody grasped an important distinction here to Trevor's point about how about if users flag particular bus stops?
Oh, I was gonna address that at some.
Obviously, Arman answered a really specific part of that of course, users aren't going to necessarily know the ins and outs of whether or not something might be formally ADA compliant. However, you know, what I heard Barry follow up on, which is an important piece for everybody to take away, is that absolutely you can email or call Pam's group as a user and say, I'm having issues with this bus stop. I think we all know not only might not some users be aware of ADA compliance and all the nuance, but there may be bus stops that are, air quotes, ADA compliant that have significant accessibility issues. So regardless of whether a bus stop is formally ADA compliant, if there's a barrier to access, if there's something that's making it difficult to use, call Pam's group, email Pam's group, and you can relay that info.
Thank you, Andy. And then we had Sam online, and then we have Heidi and Q. And if anybody else wants to jump in there, just let me know right away, because I do have a couple other comments I want to say before I lose them. So.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to comment, because I'm not sure, excuse me. I want to make sure that I'm not misunderstanding your comment, Darrell, on making the bus stops smaller. I'm not sure which ones you're at, and I do, when I ride, hit some pretty big ones, especially if they're downtown. But I am concerned about making them smaller. I don't know how many of those bus stops that you think, like how many people they hold. But if you have, let's say, a chair, somebody in a wheelchair, and a couple other people, and somebody with a guide dog,
Right.
you know, depending on the ethnicity of the people, I mean, some people prefer to stand a little bit away from guide dogs because of whatever reasons, you know, purpose of religion, whatever.
Right.
So I'm just saying that I want to be cautious about minimalizing the size of the bus stop. I would hate to be the one who's having to wait outside in 10-degree weather.
Absolutely, Sam. And I didn't mean that, what I meant was that there's gotta be a way, a compromise that we can understand that having the larger bus stop also means that it's gonna be harder to heat, it's gonna be harder to maintain as far as cleanliness, it's gonna be harder to deal with some undesirable activity that happens there. However, I know that that's the way the system's going, right? So having the smaller bus stop doesn't apply in that regard. The only reason I brought that up was to ensure that you guys look at the safetiness of a larger bus stop. You look at the lighting, you look at the receptacles, and you look at the heating. The heating is a big element in Minnesota because we spend 6 months, 7 months out of the year in cold weather. You know, so heating, you guys definitely need to look at a little bit better. So that was my point, Sam, about the smaller bus stop, because if you make something smaller, it's easier to heat, right?
You mean,
It-
yeah,
but
I just
then-
want to make sure that people who need to fit in it will fit in it.
Sure. And I wouldn't fit in it if they were too small.
Need some heat too.
Thank you for that clarification or that understanding. Sorry about that. Anybody else?
That would be me next.
Go ahead, Heidi.
My question is, if you do the open ones, because I've actually lived, just so you know, I'll always be taking Metro Mobility or the city bus unless someone sticks me in the car or taxi, because I can't physically drive at all because of the processing. So I deal with this every single day. So my question is, if you go with the open ones, are you going to be shoveling them more? Are you going to be keeping them safe? Because I have literally walked in snow, I've literally walked on ice, I've literally tried to keep warm, and I end up in spots that I'm not supposed to be. So, and then Darrell couldn't come with me because I wouldn't even put Darrell in that position because it's not even appropriate, you know, to bring. And then, are you going to go out into the suburbs and do some of them? Because I know West St. Paul recently had some vandalism from a mentally ill person, and I actually saw it and was not there when it happened, but was there when the glass decided to break more and shatter and almost hit me. So because it was on a Friday, it happened in the middle of the night, it's a Saturday, you don't do anything Saturdays and Sundays. So we had to wait for the mercy of Mondays through Fridays to get you guys to come and fix. So we got some serious issues, and I know for a fact, and I'll go back to the signs where you put for the schedules are not always appropriate too. So you got some serious issues that I think your data is kind of lacking. I don't know what you're looking at and what you're not looking, because I see it every day. And then the other thing I wanted to bring is it made the news, and I reported it, you know, I think it was a little bit after the pandemic when we could go to the doctors and stuff, because I'm over going to where Children's and United is on West 7th Street, there's the doctor's place. And it made the news, and I reported it to Transit, and they said it was the county. I saw drugs and alcohol right next to me. A guy was smoking drugs, you know, and right across is the fire station, where now it's become like for the low income or shelter for the, it's kind of like a place, a drop-in center for the poor people or the street people. And so, and I wouldn't even bring my kids out there. And then it made the news that you took some shelters away, and now you're adding shelters. How are you gonna protect those shelters from not being used for something that's not supposed to be used? Because they literally took away some shelters, you know what I mean? And they're vandalizing them. And it was really interesting how when I saw that news going, and this is Transit telling me to call the county. They take care of it. And now you guys are finally taking action because you took some of the shelters away. So I thought that was really interesting because I lived it for real. So I just wanted to bring it to your attention. You're doing all this good work, but how do we keep it good in a way that the community can use it without the homeless and some scary things where I don't want children to be around when they need to take the bus with mom and dad?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, thank you for those comments, and you are correct that our data doesn't capture these pieces of lived experience, and that's why we like to hear your discussion. I wanted to just go back to the shelter size difference in the example I showed you. The shelter that had that windscreen on the front, we still use that shelter in the system. We're just trying to make sure that where we place it, it fits well. That was an example where it really did not fit, so we scaled back to the next size down so it doesn't have a windscreen. But we continue to keep that in our inventory. We still use it where we can because we know people appreciate that fourth wall. We clear snow at all the shelters that are the kind we showed you on the images today with that standard Metro Transit logo. We clear those the same regardless of the type. The BRT stations.
Is that only in the Twin Cities? I live in a suburb, and I have reported a few times, you know, seriously, where it's been days before they even got to it.
If it's a Metro Transit shelter, regardless of municipality, we clear it. Staff go on a route. It maybe I acknowledge it could have taken them longer, and especially what you described on broken glass on a weekend. There's fewer people working to replace that. The goal is to replace the broken glass within 24 hours. I could see on a weekend,
just so you know,
it would take
longer. It was 3 times the guy did it in one night. Yeah, and that was 3 shelters. So I just wanted to tell you.
Thank you, Heidi. We're a little bit behind on our schedule here, but Richard, I see you popped up your hand.
Yeah, just
if it's real quick.
Yeah, real quick. I recognize the time. Just for the record, Eric Hendrickson.
Sorry, Eric.
No, you're good, Darrell.
My fault.
This kind of gets into the interface with your, you own and maintain the shelters or the bus stops, is that correct? So do you're operating within the right of way, you mentioned that in the initial presentation. Are you bound by the right of way line, or do you ever secure other easements when you are abutting private property for instance, if you wanted to have the larger shelter, the shelter with the screen, do you first vet out potentially talking with abutting property owners to secure easements to widen the area? Or I guess I'd be curious on that process.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, we do work to get an easement or a site license, which is a less binding agreement with a property owner, to use private property where we might need it to really make that difference. So occasionally, yes, is the short answer.
But you try to stick within the right of way, I'd assume, because of agreements you might have with those municipalities and.
Yes, it's much quicker, easier, cost-effective to work in the right-of-way, so that's our first choice. Thank you.
I know we're running out of time, so I'll just follow up with my questions that I have. But the one thing I want to say to both of you guys, thank you for the work on the Better Bus Stops presentation. I think we're headed in the right direction. I also think that consumers that use the service and have lived experience do have to figure out a way to be able to connect and be able to identify those troubled bus stops. But however, I'm a little concerned that you said that the reason we haven't allowed the public to kind of give you that information was because that, for one, you wanted to make sure that somebody knew the ADA law and et cetera, et cetera. And what I'm trying to say there is I'm sure the intern that you had there for 3 months did not understand the ADA law completely or fully, or understood the complexity of our 10,000 bus stops and our system. And so therefore, I'm wondering as to why somebody that uses the system on a day-to-day basis or on a regular basis would not have that operational or that channel right away to say, yes, here's where you drop your photos, and yes, we might not get to every spot, or we might not get to your spot particularly, but yes, thanks for giving us the feedback. And then you roll back that feedback to another intern or another potential person that is trained for those things so they can go out and look at it. So there's got to be a way that you can take filtered experience and people that use the system on a regular basis. There's got to be a way that you can take their feedback.
Oh, I'm glad he asked.
That is the only thing I would finish with publicly. There's a couple other questions I have concerns about, and I'll take those offline, but I want to thank you today, both Barry and Arman. So, well, just keep telling it to me. I'll figure it out. I have cerebral palsy, and we'll figure it out together. I apologize if I messed up your name. My wife has a really strange name too. It took me 4 months to figure her name out. So then I told her she couldn't get rid of me then after that. So, anyway,
Mr. Chair.
thank you so much.
No worries.
We hope that you come back on a regular basis to tell us what the Better Bus Stops is doing and what it looks like in maybe the 6 or 7 months that we have inclement weather or cold weather, because that's really where the majority of our riders sit, is that 6 or 7 months. Either they choose not to ride the system because they can't get to the bus stop, or they can't wait out in the cold weather for the bus stop. So if we figure out some of those challenges, we might be able to lessen the demand service on the Metropolitan side that typically picks up in the wintertime.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you. And with that, we have our next presentation, which is Home and Base Community Services, Transportation Services.
I use that
And
service.
it's the Waiver program, and it's done by Sheila, Holbrook, and the Metro Mobility Program Manager, right?
Indeed.
Thank you, Sheila. Proceed.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the committee. I'm Sheila Holbrook-White. I work in MTS and I'm the Waiver Transportation Program Manager. I'm going to talk to you today about a service that we are putting together, talk to you about a schedule, talk to you also about next steps, and then answer questions and have a discussion. Can we go to our next slide, please? I think I just laid out our agenda, so it's an overview, schedule, and next steps and questions. Next slide, please. I'd like to begin our discussion by first referencing the Metro Mobility Service Area, something with which I suspect many of you are very familiar. This slide shows a regional overview of the 7-county Twin Cities metro area. The federal ADA service area is highlighted in blue, and it includes the urban areas of Hennepin and Ramsey counties, with some limited areas in Scott and Dakota counties, and a small piece of Washington County. The non-ADA service area is highlighted in gray. This area includes parts of Hennepin, Anoka, Ramsey, Washington, Dakota, Scott, and Carver that are outside of those communities that are served by all-day fixed route service. For customers who have been certified for Metro Mobility, requests for trips that begin and end in this federally required ADA area, that which is blue, must be provided during the same days and same hours that fixed route service operates in their communities. Being placed on standby is not permitted. If a Metro Mobility customer whose trips begin and end in the federally required or blue area makes regular trips to the same location on the same days and hours of service, on the same days and hours, at least once a week, he or she can request a standing order. For that, assuming that those trips are expected to be consistent over a 6-month period, an approved standing order relieves the individual, the caregiver, allies from making advance reservations for this regularly scheduled trip. Essentially, the trip is already automatically scheduled for that individual. In the gray or non-ADA service area, a certified Metro Mobility customer whose trip begins and or ends in the gray area may be placed on standby. So in other words, a customer or a caregiver can request a trip during days and hours of service and not have a confirmed ride when they complete that request. Because of their standby status, these participants are not eligible for standing orders. So that individual, his or her family and caregivers will be calling Metro Mobility up to 4 days in advance of trips, even those that are requested for the same day, the same time, to the same location. Critically, because of capacity constraints, there is no guarantee that trips that start or end in the gray service area always get the trip and reach that destination. Next slide, please. The ADA and non-ADA service areas we just reviewed are critical in understanding the program we are developing. Some persons with disabilities receive home and community-based waiver services that allow them to live in the communities they call home while receiving the services and supports that meet their needs and advance their goals. Some waiver recipients attend day support programs. Day support program participants who qualify for Metro Mobility receive services through 2 different contracts. Through the agency contract, participants attending the region's largest day support and adult day programs whose trips begin and end in that blue area, in that federal ADA area, receive standing orders to those facilities. Similarly stable, agency contract drivers remain the same. These features offer a premium level of service at the same rate paid by every other Metro Mobility customer. Through the demand service contract, Participants attending one of the other day support programs that are not among the region's 10 largest, Metro Mobility will connect the individual to their location. If the trip starts and ends in the blue area, and the individual travels to and from that facility on the same days and at the same time, standing orders are an option. However, under the demand service, multiple drivers may be taking an individual to and from his or her day support programs. And for day support service participants who live in the non-federal ADA area, there is no standing order. There is no guarantee that they will attend or be able to access their services because they may not have a ride. Next slide, please. This map shows the regional county Twin Cities area with the Waiver Transportation Service area highlighted in green. No federal ADA service area or non-service area boundaries are shown on this map. For persons who have home and community-based waivers, this transportation service, which we are developing now, offers distinct premium services. The waiver service does not distinguish between the blue and the gray. The green represents the waiver service area with coverage in each of the 7 metro counties. Standing orders are available regardless of where the trip begins and/or ends in the waiver transportation service area, so long as the trip meets the other requirements, like travel to and from the same location at the same time. There are no standbys. There's an opportunity through this program also to reach competitive employment. As a premium service, we anticipate making waiver services, currently we are proposing to make them available Monday through Friday from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. and on Saturdays and Sundays between 8 a.m. and 10 p.m. Because this is not tied to fixed route service, changes in those services do not affect the days, areas, and hours of waiver service. Waiver services will be billed directly to DHS, so there's no onboard payment, there's no fare card. Let's go to our next slide, please. What's the impact on the lives of people? The Waiver Transportation Service offers substantive positive impacts to customers with home and community-based services. For waiver participants whose trips start and/or end in what is currently that non-ADA service area, they can now request standing orders to any of the region's day support service programs across the area. No more calling to make advance reservations and no more standbys. For waiver participants who live in what is currently the Metro Mobility Federal ADA area, they will have improved opportunity to arrange standing orders for day support services, and changes to fixed route service no longer affects their ability to access locations. Consistent across all waiver service participants are the following improvements. Expanded days and hours of service, which improves access to the community, specifically competitive employment. Consistent driver assignments. No onboard payment. A single point of service, contact for service management, and no certifications or recertifications for Metro Mobility. Next slide. The waiver service seeks to connect persons with disabilities who have home and community-based waivers to the lives they desire in their communities. And it reflects community-driven priorities, state plans, regional planning, and legislatively mandated recommendations. Focused on connecting waiver participants to the services, supports, and resources needed to remain independent, the waiver program advances multiple objectives and priorities, including the goals articulated in the state's Olmstead Plan, the regional priorities identified in the 2020 Twin Cities Public Transit and Human Services Transportation Coordinated Plan, and several recommendations found in the 2018 legislatively mandated Metro Mobility Task Force report. Next slide. A few highlights of our proposed schedule. We plan to complete the RFP in Q4 of this year and launch outreach and engagement to disability-serving agencies. We will be collaborating with lead agencies, which in this region are counties, to prepare administratively for the transition of waiver service recipients who choose to participate in the waiver program. We know that there will be significant administrative work and education and engagement, and we want to provide the requisite time and training to assist in that seamless transition as individuals elect to use this option. We prioritized this transition by starting with our current agency participants, followed by current demand passengers with waivers who have not had access to premium features, and then to passengers who may be traveling to a day support program that has not been actively cultivated, one of those other than the top largest, the 10 largest. We will also transition those current agency passengers who opt not to participate in the waiver program to Metro Mobility Demand Services. Our next slide is our final one, and so, Mr. Chair, I'll follow your lead on our next steps.
Thank you, Sheila. That was quite an interesting presentation and quite an interesting take on this unique opportunity. Like for individuals that are on waivered services, I understand that you're going to bill their waiver through DHS. When will those individuals be able to request from their worker or their agency to do the switch over?
We are currently looking at beginning service because we want to give a robust time frame for people to get prepared to know what they're choosing, to understand the pros and cons of those choices. We're looking at perhaps spring or summer of 2024.
Okay.
So it's a good bit out, but we feel like we need that time for individuals to understand this is a choice you now have and to make those transitions and supports available.
And my only other concern is I know that a lot of individuals, I have clients that are on waivered services, and one of the benefits that they get in their waivered service, they get the Go card, right? And that Go card can be used on Metro Mobility, it can be used on any service that we have in our system other than the demand side, I believe. That's probably a paid service, I would assume.
As if they're qualified for both
But
sides.
yeah, if they're, well, that's what I'm saying. So if this program was implemented, would that affect that piece of their waivered piece? Because a lot of folks rely on that Go card as even a backup, to be able to get around if they don't have an appropriate way of doing that.
Mr. Chair, thank you for that great question. This is but one option that is available to individuals with home and community-based waivers. That they may also want additional options for which they qualify, let's say Metro Mobility, demand response. That is up to that individual in partnership with that lead agency to get that go-to card for those that elect that.
Great, thank you. I just didn't want this to overshadow some of those services that those individuals begin to rely on and live with.
Thank you,
So
Mr. Chair.
thank you. Go ahead, Heidi.
I have a couple of questions, because I was a little concerned because I ride Metro Mobility and I get waiver services, I get caddy waiver. And so I get a gold card like he's talking about. And I get the bus because I'm qualified, and I get a monthly bus pass, and then I get $80 worth of money to take some rides. And it's a little confusing to get all this information. So are you going to have a website that helps and some really good training for the social workers? Because there can be some serious miscommunication problems. And I don't know if and Andy's here, so he can be on the other side of the thing and maybe answer it. I can see when you're setting it up, they might be a little confused, on Metro Mobility side, because they don't understand all the nuance of how the counties and how you want to do this program. And then the other thing I wanted to bring up is, when there's holidays and certain things, there's a note on Metro Mobility that says standing orders have to be changed. So the way you present it, it's like I don't have to do anything, I'm free, I'm happy, everything's perfectly fine, but then I read the sign on Metro Mobility that says it changed, and Andy can explain it better than I can, if you want to, because it kind of changes, because you're telling us, and a lot of the people on the bus are human services
Heidi, your
participants.
question should be directed to Sheila.
I know, but I'm just saying them two,
Yep.
because he might be able to explain it better to her.
Mr. Chair, if I
Go
can
ahead.
answer the first question, and then I'll defer to Andy if you'd like to pick up the second.
You may, go ahead, sorry about that.
So your first question, Heidi, I think, committee members, is an important one. You have these options and services currently. This becomes another option from which you may select in partnership with your lead agency. Your point about the need for specific training and education around what this option entails and working with lead agencies is in fact part of the reason we delayed implementation, because we want that pathway to be seamless for the individual, for that person to understand the choice that they have, to make that choice, and for all that administrative backup stuff that can take so long and frustrate people because they're waiting to start. We want to give ourselves a long lead time for that so that it is seamless for those who transition.
Okay.
I'm going to defer the question that you asked to Andy because I'm not sure I fully understand it and I wouldn't want to speak on behalf of Metmo.
Thank you. Go ahead, Andy.
Chair, Heidi, members of the committee, yeah, I think this is another example of a potential benefit of the waiver program. Metro Mobility has particular days that all standing orders are canceled, holidays. Those are spelled out in the service guide. And while there have been times where we have made exceptions to that, the waiver program is going to work much more closely with DT&H providers. If there is a particular day that's not on those holidays, that numerous providers are closed, they can cancel that standing order more easily. If there is a particular holiday that Metro Mobility cancels standing orders, but those DT&Hs or job sites are going to be open, then the waiver transportation program can still provide those trips. So it is an opportunity to be much less cookie cutter than something the size of Metro Mobility.
Is that going to be spelled out very clearly for someone who, like for me, I have to set up my own rides and do some of this my own, or how do we train some of the people who come to our houses to help us, so they can help us do it correctly if we're more than qualified and they think we should go into this program?
Yeah, Sheila can speak to the particulars there, Heidi, but I think that as we get closer to rollout, as this program matures and approaches a go-live date, absolutely education to county workers and the contractors who are working on waivers is really important, so that your waiver workers who come out and talk to you about your options have all the details and can really help you make the best choice for you.
And one other thing, are you going to have a video or some kind of learning thing? So if we can pull it up and then the person who has to come to my house and help me, well, I do it myself, but I have friends that really do need help setting up a ride to make sure they don't get lost or screwed or whatever. So is there a way that the worker who comes to your house or the PCA, whatever they're called, because there's many different names under this human services, under CADI, which I have. So are you going to have a video so we can pull it up and they can learn? Or because basically the social worker is going to send it off to the worker who comes to the house and they have to figure this out. They're just doing one part of it, getting signed up. Now we have to put it into action and make sure we can actually follow what you want us to do.
Mr. Chair and committee members, Two issues. I think on the schedule, if you looked back to the slide right before the end, we're starting to do that outreach to the disability serving agencies, and we've been talking to the lead agencies for several months.
Okay.
We're beginning that outreach now because we want to make sure that people have a chance to ask those questions and thoroughly understand. We have not made a specific We have not specifically defined what educational tools we'll be using, but I appreciate the video idea, and we'll take that back as we talk to folks that do that
Use
communication.
real people that actually use the service, not just actors that don't have anything to do with it. So I think that will tell the story even better.
I think that's great feedback. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sheila. As well, is there any questions online? Any questions for Sheila? Or the waiver rollout that they expect in 2024, I heard, right?
That's correct.
Exciting, it's coming up pretty soon, so.
Oh, we have one down here.
Any questions?
Here.
I particularly asked for online, and if I don't see any, then we'll go to the one on the end there.
Just a quick question.
Yes.
To either you or Andy, will there be separate vehicles that'll be used for the agency waiver things, or will it be all combined under Metro Mobility when we already have a lot of people using it, and this is going to add on more people? It's going to be separate?
Thank you for that question, Mr. Chair and
Go ahead.
committee members. They will be separate.
Okay.
There are two specific rationales behind that. The waiver program will be available in a different hours and days of service than is Metmo in some communities. And so we'll be using a different vehicle. Also, the vehicles we'll be using for the waiver program will not have fare card or fare boxes.
Right.
Because this is going to be a fare-free, so there's no fare card payment.
Right.
So they will be different, but they will be accessible. And our expectation is that the quality of service that oftentimes people are getting today through the agency program would be continued through waiver with additional supports and premium benefits.
Thank you.
It's an excellent question. Thank you for that.
Thank you. To, Sheila, to Claudia's point, when you talk about the vehicles will be different, I get they'll be different because they'll no longer have the football and some other collection devices, but more importantly, I think we're going to branding, so will they be able to identify
Yes.
that is my waiver bus versus my Metro Mobility bus, or versus the 219 bus that goes around circulates in my neighborhood? I mean, will we be able to quickly identify that that's my waivered ride that I'm scheduled to take, or is that Metro Mobility bus waiting to pick somebody else up?
Mr. Chair and committee members, we're working through that communications plan right now with the very folks that helped build the branding for Metro Mobility. And so we'll be happy to come back to you when we have a better understanding of how that'll appear, what that branding might look like.
Great, thank you.
But I do appreciate that question. It's a great one.
Thank you.
Sam Jasmine?
Go ahead, Sam.
I have a question. I apologize if this was covered and I missed, but are there things that will be put in place to kind of ensure the longevity of this program as opposed to having it get cut once people get used to it, if things get tough?
Sam,
Is the county?
Mr. Chair, committee members, I really appreciate your question. In many respects, oh, go ahead. I thought you were finished with your question.
No, I am. I'm waiting.
Oh, okay. I appreciate your question very much. That's what it is. It's the echo. The part of the reason we're moving forward on this is this does allow the council to receive funds through DHS. And that allows us to draw down more federal funds. That allows us to reinvest them in these services. And so this does build sustainability in the long term. It is, I would argue, not the primary reason we're doing this, because it's partially also to make sure that folks with home and community-based waivers have the lives that they want, but that is an added benefit that we can reinvest those funds in this program and support sustainability over the long term.
we're running a little bit over time now, and I'm just trying to get us back on track, Heidi, but, if
I just
it's
have a quick question.
real quick.
My quick question is, are you gonna have photographs for the people who need to know what the new vehicles look like? And are you working with the counties? Because many years ago, when they did this program, they said they could, cut the funding anytime they wanted to. So how did this go in the future to make sure it's sustainable so all of our questions get heard correctly?
Heidi, if you remember right, just a couple minutes ago, not even a minute ago, Sheila mentioned that she will bring back that branding proposal that
Oh, I
you will-
know,
you
but
will
I'm
show
just-
us. And that, in that branding proposal, Heidi, then that will clearly identify to us what vehicles we're to use, and what vehicles we're to get on and off of.
That's great, but if you don't have certain things in place, because I know for a fact, I take this Metro Mobility enough times, Darrell, to know that they know what Metro Mobility looks like. They that might not be their vehicle, so we have to be really clear with some of these people who need that extra step in order to know what the vehicle is and might need some training. They might need a blow up of that picture and maybe put it in their house and they learn what that vehicle is, because I don't know if this is gonna change the whole upside down
Heidi, I
picture.
clearly hear your concern, and that's why I wanted Sheila to know branding is definitely an issue. It's an issue around the country when we talk about transit and specialized services around the country. So branding and Metro Mobility and Metro Transit has done a particularly good job about branding their services. So I wouldn't hesitate, I wouldn't think that they would do a poor job in branding
hope
a
not.
specialized service like this. So I just urge you to give them a little time, Heidi.
Oh, I know, but I
let them-
still have the right to propose that question, just because I've seen people who need certain things in place.
Great.
Mr. Chair, I can just answer. We look forward
do.
to building on the branding tradition of the council as a whole, which is to make services very clear. Take your idea back as thinking about ways we can make sure that it's clear to any passenger who's using waiver services. And again, thank you for the opportunity today.
And thank you so much, Sheila, and we look forward to working with you as this rolls out. Thank you. And with that, we have our final presentation today, and that is Metro Transit Operations and Accessibility Continuity Improvement with Brian Funk, the Chief Operating Officer, and then I had the pleasure to meet the new chief, right? Is that who I met?
Yes, Mr. Chair, our new deputy chief for all of our transportation service, so all of the service delivery that Metro Transit provides on our fixed route buses and light rail, and North Star, in fact, is being kind of routed through Mr. Michael Powell, who's in the audience. He comes to us from New York City with a long career at the MTA, starting as a bus operator and having varied experience. So we're excited to have him on board as of August 1st. So. And Mr. Chair, I'll do my best to get the committee back on time. I think my item
It's
can
quite
be.
all right. We got plenty of time. I understood that this was a hot topic.
Right.
And you had some good stuff for us.
I believe I do, sir, and so what I intended to provide today was an update by way of me just sort of explaining how we arrived at this point and then the actions that we've been taking at Metro Transit. I do have a kind of a written summary report that I'll provide to members both in attendance as well as electronic version for those online. But just to get us started and sort of reoriented, recently Metro Transit and the Met Council reached a settlement with an individual who did not have great experiences in all cases riding our services on the fixed route bus. And the gentleman that we had been working with over the last, it's been about 6 years, it was an individual who has a deaf-blind condition. And so the importance of our buses stopping in the exact same location each time was something that was of high importance to him. And unfortunately, we did not meet that expectation each and every time. And so we strive to do better. I think as this committee knows, We operate a lot of service, about 5,000 trips every weekday, even in with less service right now. We have a large operator pool who take pride in providing public service, but there are times where we don't quite get it right. And so we've taken seriously the need to really refocus on our training and setting expectations and making sure that we follow through at a higher percentage of success. And so what I'll walk through right here are just sort of the key elements that we had committed to. Many of these are standing practices or enhancements to items that we've started over the last several years. And I think members of this committee are familiar with some of our efforts, including the experiential training that we do provide for our new bus operators.
Just point of clarification, sir, we did not receive anything in our packet relating to this. Am I correct in that, Allison?
Yep.
Okay, so, yeah, so we might have couple questions at the end, so.
I understand, and I apologize for that, that I did not provide that in advance to Allison, so.
There's a hand up.
And Ken, you do have your hand up. Ken, go, if you want, go ahead, Ken. We'll give him a chance to unmute.
I hope he can hear you.
Can you hear me, Ken?
Ken, can you hear him?
Okay, well, we'll come back to him when he can,
Figure it out.
unmute, and maybe Brian will be kind enough to stop so he can.
I'll just, if I could say something here, traditionally, and Ken, give me a thumbs up or something if this is where you're going.
There we go.
We've been pretty consistent with the messaging that if for whatever reason we can't get a presentation to the committee in advance, for accessibility reasons, just don't use a PowerPoint or anything, just talk it through. So that would be best practice to go ahead and do that, so the folks that can't follow along visually aren't at a disadvantage for following along with the presentation. So I think if we could go with that, that would be consistent and would be best practice.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And Ken, we'll just circle back with you again. If you can hear us, give us an indication that you want to speak, and you'll be more than able to do so.
Are you allowed to?
Yeah, Chair, and I just found my button, so thank you, but I'll wait until after the presenter's finished.
Okay, we'll come to you first then.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Chair, and so the items that Metro Transit and Met Council have agreed to provide enhancements to include updating our video that provides instruction for our bus operators on where to stop. Our goal has been and continues to be that we're stopping at the T sign, the bus stop sign, in an effort to be as consistent as possible. Now, as people who use our system, especially on the fixed route network, we know that there may be some reasons why that particular location is not available to an operator. Winter weather may be an example, an errant trash can or newspaper box or some other blockage. And so in that event, we provide instructions for our operators to clearly announce their stop and be able to communicate with any customers who are at a disadvantage or not able to see exactly where they are. We've committed to sort of this enhanced level of training and doubling down on our communications for at least the next 3 years. We believe that this is an industry best practice and that we're meeting both ADA and exceeding to be able to provide that clear and again consistent service. So this has become our routine. As I mentioned, we've been doing this for a number of years, but we're committed to doing it into the future. As a part of that, we've reissued our operating bulletins, which serve as work rules for all of our employees. We've also issued a specific, what we call a route information bulletin that goes to operators on specific routes. And so in this case, the individual that we had been working with, he primarily rides on the routes 3, 6, 17, and 114. And so operators who work one of those assignments, every time they come in for an assignment, receive a reminder notification that there may be somebody who needs that extra assistance on their route, again, to try to make sure that we're providing that consistent service. Even though we have a long block of training when employees are new, we recognize that there's a lot of things that people are contending with early in their career, and that a refresher training is beneficial to all of us. And so we've committed for the next 2 years at least to be able to provide a 10-minute refresher training on the importance of this consistent practice and why it's beneficial to all of our customers, especially those who are deaf, blind, or deafblind. And then, in addition, new supervisors and managers, if they've not received that bus operator training, many of us have risen through the ranks from that position, but not all. They also will be required to complete that training so that when they're coaching and working with employees, they have a full understanding of what the expectations are. We're also going to be doing monitored, both announced and unannounced, by supervisors in the field to be able to ensure that we're complying with this and we're not just waiting for something potentially to go wrong or for somebody to call in. And so we're taking that proactive measure as part of this commitment to ensure that we do self-monitoring and hold ourselves accountable. And then we've agreed that if there are future disputes or complaints about where the bus stopped, that we'll have a consistent standard between all parties. And we're sharing this publicly so that everybody kind of knows what our standard is. And what that includes is that, using the onboard video, we're able to see clearly out the front door of the bus when it stopped, looking towards the curb. And so what we've agreed to is that if that bus stop sign is visible in the front door, through the 32, 36-inch wide front door, we've met the standard. And so that's what we're aiming for. Or if in this case, the complainant or his guide dog is visible in that front door because we've had to stop at a location that doesn't have a sign or the sign's knocked down or something else, we're saying that we've met the requirement, we agreed to that. Or if the bus operator exits the bus and communicates with the individual to let them know what route is approaching, we've met the standard. And so that's what we're doing. And then, of course, we'll continue to follow up on any issues that this particular individual has. And like we always do, we'll work through the customer relations process for anyone who does not have a good experience on our fixed route service and try to make it right. So those are the highlights that I really wanted to share, and as mentioned, at the discretion of the chair and the committee, I'm happy to share written documents. Again, apologies for not providing them in advance.
Please forward anything over to Allison that you would like, and she'll get it out to our committee.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks. And with that, I do want to say two things before I go to Ken. I did say Ken would go first, but this is a kind of a comment towards Ken. I began to be aware of this kind of issue a few years ago when I also understood that during rush hour time, the buses do what they call jump the line, okay? And jumping the line is against your policy. We don't allow that. But during rush hour time, when you got buses that jump the line, it's not just a poor practice and against your policy. It limits people like myself who may be waiting for that second bus or that third bus that's behind that first bus that might not be jumping the line because he knows what to do or she knows what to do. But those two other buses, they want to catch up and make their time up. So they're jumping the line. And it was to Ken's point, I believe, when I talked about it. And then I actually, I went and observed this just a few minutes down the road here, that they jump the line all the time. And how do you reprimand your drivers for that? Because during rush hour time, they don't understand that when you jump the line, you're missing people.
Yeah, Mr. Chair and committee members, you're exactly right, is that is contrary to what we're instructing our operators. Now, There could be an exception if the first bus in line has a mechanical malfunction
Or
and is
boarding
broken
somebody
down.
and takes too long to board.
Yeah,
them.
or exactly, or if they're boarding or waiting for a supervisor or security response or something of that nature. However, what our training does do is advise their operators that they must ensure that that stop is clear and that they've communicated the route that they're operating should anyone want to board that bus. If that front sign or side sign either isn't visible or the person seeking to use the bus can't see it or read it, that's our expectation, because we're in the business of transporting people, and leaving people at bus stops is, of course, not achieving our objective.
So I guess my point was, do we include individuals or operators that jump the line as well? Are they included in this additional training for the next 2 years? You can pull them back in if you catch them doing it. Give them a 10-minute refresher course is what you said. And then we put them back on the line, right?
Right, yeah, Mr. Chair, you're right. And so that is both part of what we're monitoring. It's part of that standard operating procedure for entering, clearing, and then departing a bus stop. And so it's a whole 3-step process to be able to both enter it safely, utilize your mirrors, make sure that you're achieving the goal of entering safely and departing safely and merging back into traffic, and each of those steps. And one part I didn't get into, but since you touched on it, is that we do have, of course, a collective bargaining agreement on levels of discipline that arise from people failing to follow our rules, but we do apply that for people who either are unwilling or unable to follow our expectations.
Thank you. And with that, we'll go to you, Ken. Sorry about that.
Yeah, that's all right. Can you hear me okay?
You bet.
Okay. I really appreciate your presentation and sharing the settlement with us in terms of how this was resolved. I didn't hear in your list of items that are going to be corrected or provided moving forward to make our system better. I didn't hear any specific item that related to this individual it was well known that this individual had complained many times over a period of 2 years that this was happening, yet nobody took that complaint seriously. So somewhere along the way, the system broke down whereby a citizen can make a complaint and then it gets followed up on properly. I want to just make sure that that part of the system has been addressed. I know we're all human beings running as best we can, and we don't always live up to our high expectations, but we need to have workable solutions in place, that systems are in place that when an issue happens and it gets reported, something happens to correct that. And I didn't hear that in your list. Has that been addressed?
Mr. Chair and committee members, I believe that it has, and we've acknowledged that because of both the scope and size and duration of our system, that we had a failing, that we did not recognize what were events that seemed to be happening not at the same time, same location with same employee. That was a gap in our ability to identify an issue. And so in this specific case, and hopefully moving forward, we've set up a process to have a more centralized evaluation of those complaints so that we're able to take action even quicker than we did. And I would say that, in this case, part of when it became a little bit more clear to us earlier on, or at least compared to today in 2018, we did take that preemptive step before any litigation to try to address it through that onboard experiential training, committing to that through our professional operator development program. But yes, point is well taken, that we'll continue to do better.
Okay, and the only other thing I just want to leave you is with a concept that's maybe a little difficult for everyone to understand, but it really needs to be understood, especially by those receiving complaints or issues in some sort of organized way. Many people with disabilities have speech difficulties or communication difficulties. And with this particular example, this was a deaf and blind individual whom I know personally, and I understand his speech, but I understand also that his form of communication is limited. And I just want to make sure that people on the receiving end of receiving comments and complaints are fully aware and understand, have patience to listen, have patience to read, maybe even reading through the lines to reach out when there's a question and not just assume that they don't understand it and pass on it. I want to just make sure that everyone gets the respect and opportunity to be heard and a follow-up happens with that individual. And sometimes that's very nuanced. I understand that, but it's really critical, especially for people in the customer service realm.
Point well taken, Ken, thank you. And Brian's very aggressively shaking his head, yes, he.
Yes, sir, thank you.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
any other questions? I guess you're off the hook.
All right, thank you, sir, and again, I will provide those materials, and apologies.
Now I remember my question.
Sorry, wow, Heidi's not gonna let you off the hook. Go ahead, Heidi.
I'm still in the seat, so yes.
This is kind of hard to do. I did go to bus stops where there might be 2 or 3 buses, like the 54, where I catch the 54, it's like right out this area.
Right.
There can be like 3 or 4 buses, and then you have to figure out, so how do you know if those buses are doing everything correctly that you just said, when they're lined up like a, like a train, like here's the first one, second one, the third one, and everyone's getting their needs met, and I read the signs, because sometimes we have to do a little investigating, in the front and the side, because the buses don't always talk to us and yell it out, and because it's a newer feature. So we have to figure that out, and I've been at different bus stops, and I seen what Darrell's talking about, where they jump the line, where they go around, and the other thing I've seen is they're not really going to the bus stop because there's like 3 or 4 cars in front of them, but they'll let me off here, and is it really okay to do that? And then I'll walk down to the end of the sidewalk to get where I need to go appropriately. So can you answer those questions, or know how to fix it, or deal with it, or bring it back to your guys?
So I think, Mr. Chair and council member, or committee member, I'll answer that a couple of ways. I'll start with the second question first, which is part of our training does require that the operators are using their best judgment on where the safest place is to stop, so they're not boxing themselves in.
Even in wintertime?
Wintertime would be a great example of that, or even if there's a car parked in the bus stop, we want them to choose an alternate location that they deem safe as opposed to skipping the stop, for example. And so that's part of their training, and it comes to some degree with experience, but we provide some guidance and examples through our instruction staff. And to your first point about kind of our compliance to rules and whatnot, we do have field supervisors who are out to make sure that they're monitoring our operation, and I entrust them to be ensuring that we're following our training and doing what our customers expect. And so part of what I can take away from today's meeting is to reiterate the importance of being there and being at bus stops to make those observations and ensure that we're providing that service. And
when you say trust, what does that mean? Because they like using that word, and then we have to figure out what that means. Right. Does that mean all the buses are lined up correctly, or what does trust mean?
Right. Yeah, so to me, because I'm not personally able to observe every bus at every stop, right? So I need to be able to provide the training, and then I provide the supervision in the field to monitor and ensure that they're following our rules. And so I'm entrusting, but I also verify, and that's one thing that I'll take away from this meeting, is to make sure that that's a focal point for our staff that are out in the field monitoring the operations. For example, when I ride the bus home today, I'm gonna walk over and probably catch a Route 74 right here at 6th and Robert. And that'll be something I monitor, and believe me that if I don't see something happening the way I would expect it, that'll be reported. And so
So
those are the
you-
checks and balances that we try to put in place.
So are you going to be using the videos that are on the vehicles to kind of get some ideas if they really are holding true to what your vision is?
Yeah, Mr. Chair and committee members, so we use the videos typically in a investigative form. So if we're made aware that there's an issue or somebody observed something that didn't work, we'll use that evidence to be able to, sort of evaluate from a neutral perspective exactly what occurred and what transpired. We also, as I think the group knows, have, full GPS monitoring, and so we're able to see where every bus is at a polling rate of about once every 10 seconds. And so we're able to see the order that buses arrive into the stops and how they depart, and it has a feature to note if the door was opened and items like that. And so,
And is that GPS being updated? Because technology gets old.
Right.
And because I know the forest people use it and the city buses use it, and they're kind of working together because there's some real cool technology coming out of both of those.
Yep. Yeah, Mr. Chair, and committee members, so we do have a side project working on updating those onboard mobile gateways so that we're able to both use the radio cellular connection. So if either one is more accurate, we're able to have that redundancy. And so we continue to have that, those investments made into our capital improvement plan.
Thank you. Thank you. And I do have a couple follow-up questions, but I'll follow up with you online about that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
And with that, Andy, you have the floor.
Thanks, Chair, members of the committee. Just a real brief information item that needed to be added to the agenda because we're aware there has been kind of a larger issue, particularly with folks in the East Zone.
Is that my zone, by the way?
Yep. Really, since I started, I've been working with the council for 17 years. And we've always been talking about driver shortages, that it's just a reality in paratransit, and it is perpetual. And that's been true nationwide. And that's always been true, but it lends itself to almost feeling a little bit like the little boy who cried wolf, because we thought it was bad then. But man, in the pandemic environment that we're in now, and the hiring market that we're in now, we've never been short of drivers like this. It is absolutely unprecedented. The way that it impacts our system is unprecedented. Certainly, Brian could speak to that on the fixed route side as well. We've never had to cut fixed route like we are doing. We've never had to struggle with paratransit like we are doing. We are severely, severely short of drivers. And one of the ways that we have been dealing with that at the Metro Mobility level, again, particularly in the East Zone, is by denying non-ADA rides that are outside the federally mandated area. And we've been denying hundreds of those a day. And we are aware that that has a significant negative impact on folks with disabilities and their ability to maintain independence. We're aware that that's at odds with the council's mission. But again, we've got very few options as we look at the driver shortage where it's at. The council has decided really that we need to look elsewhere to try to address that issue, that trip denials have become just a little bit too big of a deal, that have gone on for too long. In a different stage of the pandemic, they might have been more understandable, but that, now there's a question of when this hiring market is going to change. We just don't know. And we cannot, as a council, continue to deny those non-ADA rides. So what we are doing is we're going to prioritize immediate ceasing of denying non-ADA rides. And what we're trying to do to make that jibe with the reality of our hiring situation with operators is we are going to stop damaging providers for any service that exceeds or meets the ADA federal performance metrics. So those of you who've been here a while probably know that while the federal standard, for example, for on-time performance is 90%, we damage for anything that doesn't meet 93%. You know, we would really like to perform above the federal standard. We're going to continue to bonus to try to incentivize performance, you know, at that 93 or above, so that folks are incentivized at the contractor level to go above and beyond and do what they can. But we're going to take away the damages so that folks don't have to feel like, God, the basement I really need to meet is at 93 or I'm going to get damaged, so I better deny these non-ADA rides so I can hit that 93%. We're taking away that damage in an effort to work with our contractors in partnership to remove those denials, because we really, that's not something that we can sustain anymore at this point. So if you've had your trips denied, you will stop seeing that. If you haven't had your trips denied, particularly in the non-ADA service area, you may see contractors using that negotiation window a little more aggressively. You may see trips that are pushing that on-board time a little bit more, and you may see a slight dip in on-time performance. But we are doing what we can to do all trips while at least meeting the federal minimums for on-time performance standards, particularly within the ADA service area.
Well, thank you for that.
I have a quick question.
That was important.
Can I say something?
Go ahead, Heidi.
My question is now, because we just heard the story about human services and the waiver services, how is that going to work with what you just said, so it can kind of mirror and not cause like some scary headaches or confusion or problems? You know what I mean? For people who have disabilities when they roll it out.
Well, Chair, members of the committee, the waiver service, first of all, is more than a year down the road. We certainly hope that we're in a different hiring situation at that point. Even if we're not, that is exclusively subscription or standing order based. So there will be no trip denials per se on that waiver program. It's a standing order system, and just like with Metro Mobility standing orders now, those are automatically assigned to a run. They are scheduled, they are set in stone. So that won't impact the waiver program when it rolls out.
Great.
Sam Jasmine.
Go ahead, Sam.
Hey, Andy, I was wondering if you could explain you said the east zone. What does that encompass? I know it's not mine.
Services currently provided by First Transit East. Roughly speaking, Anoka, Ramsey County, and East. But while I should point out that while the primary denial, the primary numbers of denials have taken place in the East, the service impact as we take away any options for even occasional denials, do impact all zones. It's just that most impact will probably be seen with any change in the East zone.
Well, I will tell you that I know I'm in a non-ADA zone, but I have had, in general, and I'll jinx myself, I'm sure, fairly okay service. I have had no denials, so that's a nice thing for you to bring back or to know.
Thank you, Sam.
Mr. Chair, just one
Go ahead.
quick, is this temporary? So once hiring levels, go back up to a level that you could go beyond the federal minimums, would that be the goal, to reinstate that 93 or above?
Yeah, Chair, members of the committee, it is really our hope that tomorrow something happens and we, can go back to something resembling a more normal job market. We are also exploring a variety of other things we can do to stop the bleeding with regard to driver hiring, from referral bonuses to, trying to get wage increases through. But yes, absolutely, our hope is that this is a temporary thing.
Thank you.
Great. Well, with that, I'm gonna go, I know we have a couple more questions, but I'm gonna I wanna know if Ken has a, Blue Line update.
Yeah, so we have resumed our Blue Line CAC meetings, and we have just had our first meeting. It was with the Business Advisory Committee, and we've set our goals for the next year and a half. Right now, the Blue Line is focusing on finalizing an alignment from Target Field through the first several stops in Minneapolis, North Minneapolis. There's still a couple of options on the table, and there's still a lot of public engagement going on. So that's where we are right now. The rest of the line is shaping up, but nothing has been finalized yet.
Thank you for that. And I don't see Chris Bates on our
No.
in our room today. So that would be the green line. And then the two reports that I have are the for the gold line and the purple line. I will tell you the gold line very quickly. We broke ground on the gold line in what was it? October 19th in Woodbury.
Yeah,
It was an exciting time for the BRT and bus rapid transit and what that means for the East Metro and its connection to the East Metro. And then
Aren't you
the
gonna
other,
say Nikki was on TV because she was?
I didn't notice Nikki was on TV. She does TV quite a bit, so
Oh, yeah.
if she was
there
on,
for the
if she was on
breaking news.
TV, great. I know she was, that she was there with me in attendance. So I know they used her in a few pictures under the Met Council. So, and it was an exciting time for Metro Transit and for the BRT projects to be showcased. It was the only event that I've been at where our senator, our U.S. senator, and our U.S. congressperson was there. It was a fairly nice day. It was a little chilly, but I dressed warm for it. And so that will roll out on in 2025, I believe. So that was exciting. And then the purple line, I also serve on that. That has a little bit more challenging to it. However, that we will start doing some public engagement, hopefully in the end of November, at the end of this month, and it should roll out. The public engagement period should go almost till Christmas time, or there about the first of the year, and then I'll be able to come back and give you a more extensive report after we get some of the feedback from the public on that. So I'm very proud to be part of those two projects. And with that, we're at adjournment with overtime. We're at what? Oh, we got actually 2 more minutes yet, 3 more minutes if we wanted to. Our clock's a little fast here, but so other than that, that's all I had for today. Anybody have any other quick questions, concerns, or any member comment, rather, I should say? Because I see public comment left us.
Oh, I do have one thing.
Yes.
This is kind of funny, but.
Go ahead.
I saw one of the city buses, and I did see, because we talked about this in one of our meetings, advertising on the side of the bus for Metro Transit,
Yes.
stuff. So I did see that in West St. Paul. But the funny thing I saw was an advertising for Ritz crackers on our city bus.
Interesting.
I thought that was funny in West
That
St.
is-
Paul.
that-
I do so often.
that is
So we
funny.
are like really into advertising the most funniest things.
And here, Heidi, I thought you were gonna make a motion for adjournment, but that is pretty funny, though. I like
So I
Ritz
thought to
crackers,
share
though.
that, just to end the thing.
Thank
Because
you.
Every time I see that, I laugh.
With that, can I have a motion for adjournment, please?
I motion it. Third, second.
Second, first and second.
Yep.
I had a question.
Oh, sorry, I forgot to ask folks online, sorry. Go ahead.
thought that was.
Sam, go ahead.
No, it's, Patsy.
Oh, Patsy, go ahead.
Go ahead, Patsy.
I was just wondering, how are things with the bus priority seating going? I noticed you had it on the agenda, but we didn't really
The
talk about it.
bus priority seating, I have not had an update on that recently, but I will make sure that we put that on the first part of our agenda for next month, so we can talk about that, okay?
She gave you thumbs up.
With that, we're adjourned.